everybody, welcome back to Midvale Minis. I'm Kat. Now behind me you can see this lovely Newport mansion that I will be converting into a haunted house, but not today. Today I will, however, be creating a character that will be in the haunted house. There's going to be a party going on, the witches are having a party, and I'm going to be creating this one character that's going to be in my rock band. Now, I'm not even going to get to this project for a really long time, but I thought I would at least start now. It's Halloween. I wanted to start with one of the characters. And who better to start with than One Eyed Willy from the Goonies? Here is the dollar store skeleton I'm going to use to create One Eyed Willy. I'm going to be having a rock band in my haunted doll house, and I figured it would be perfect to have One Eyed Willy playing the organ. In the movie, One Eyed Willy is a pirate from centuries ago who creates booby traps to protect his treasure from marauders. And one of the booby traps that he creates is an organ created out of human bones, and you have to play the notes correctly in order to move on. And so I've always associated One Eyed Willy with the organ. So I thought if I'm going to be having a monster band, it would be perfect to have One Eyed Willy playing the organ. So now I have to adjust his limbs in a way that allows him to sit at the organ and play. So here you can see I am adjusting his limbs so that he can be seated and in a position to be able to play the organ. Now, I also wanted to have an open mouth. I am going to be showing you a reference image, and in the image, his mouth is definitely open. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm adjusting his mouth, adjusting his jaw, adjusting his teeth to match my reference image. Now, I tried to use this Loctite glue, and it just would not hold. I tried and tried and tried, and it just absolutely positively would not hold. So I decided I was going to use some hot glue instead. And then after I used the hot glue, which worked perfectly, I went back and rewatched for about the fifth time Ava Bentley's video on the smoking man from Bentley House Miniatures. And what she does is she uses the hot glue, which we all know could pop off, it could fail over time. And so what she does is she takes little pieces of toilet paper and some tacky glue, and she makes joints. She covers the joints with that. So here I am positioning his feet, the bottom part of his legs rather, so that he can actually reach the pedals of the organ, and his hands are in a position to be playing the keys. Here you can see I'm repositioning the jaw, and it actually worked out really well. I did fight quite a lot to get it apart in the first place, but that's because I didn't change my X-Acto blade. So if you ever want to do this, just use a fresh X-Acto blade. It comes out looking really good. And here's where I use my little bandages and wrap them with the tacky glue around each joint to make sure that they don't give way in the future. Sometimes when I'm moving him across the screen there, it looks like he's tiptoeing. Does it look like that to anybody else? Okay, so here we go. We're adding more glue, making sure he's good to go. Here's my reference image. Now, as you can see in that image, he's wearing a hat, but in this image from the actual movie, he's not. So that's the image we're going to be using. We're going to be using a bandana instead of a hat, and here I am matching his skin tone, or I don't even know what you'd call that. It's not really a skin tone, but anyway, we're matching his coloring, and I'm using a burnt sienna, and I just watered it down and covered his entire body with the burnt sienna. Now, he's been sitting there for centuries, so some of it is him, and some of it is dirt and grime and dust of the centuries. So he's pretty dirty, and it's okay if I just cover him completely with the burnt sienna. I am leaving some of the white showing through. And as I progress making his clothing and stuff, some of it does sort of rub off, which is totally fine because it gives it a little bit more interest and a little bit more shading. Now, the other thing is I needed to fill his eyes with the watered down black paint. So I did his eyes and his nose, and also where his teeth are missing. Here I am painting in his teeth with some off-white paint. It's amazing how just these tiny little details really make it pop, really make it come alive, even from as far away as this camera is to the skeleton. It just looks so much better just by doing that. And I'm adding some shading in here and some, I think I'm using black here. I wanted to use, I do a lot of tweaking of the coloration. It takes a long time, but every last little detail that you put in makes things look more realistic. And so I don't mind spending the time, I enjoy it. Okay, so now I'm adding more detail with the black. And I looked at my reference image and I thought the nose was a little bit bigger. And so I did that. And here he is. He's in phase 1. Now there's one obvious thing that I had to do, and this is just for me because nobody's going to see this. It's going to be covered by an eye patch. But One Eyed Willy is so named because he was only born with one eye. So, in the movie, it is revealed that that's why he was called One Eyed Willy. So, nobody's going to see this, but I'll know it's there, and it's just one of those little details I had to do. So, I used some air dry clay, and I filled in his left eye with the air dry clay. Now, this, if you look at the reference image, I would have thought it would have been a solid color, but if you look at the reference image, there are definite colors in there. It almost looks like a floral type print on his jacket. So I thought that this brightly colored tie-dye fabric would be perfect. Now I am working on the eye patch. I used a bit of faux leather and cut it down to the right size, and it was really easy to work with. I just used scissors, and I highly recommend using it. It was great. It was terrific to work with, and it really looks like leather. Now, in the reference image, you can see that there are little gems, I guess, on the outside of the eye patch. This is the part that gave me the most trouble of this entire project. Adhering the gems to that teensy tiny little eye patch. First, I put down Mod Podge over the entire eye patch and tried to put the little gems on top of it, and it didn't. Some of them stuck and some of them didn't, and the whole thing peeled off, and I ended up using tacky glue instead. Now here I am coloring in the dried air dry clay, and again tweaking. I have to add more details, and this is what he's looking like so far. More dental adjusting. And here you can see I put on some glue and put on the piece of fabric. And I was so excited with how it looked, that it looked so perfect that I glued it onto his head without remembering that the eye patch is actually supposed to go under it. So here he is tiptoeing again. Anyway, I thought that actually worked out really, really well. So I glued it on, and then I took a piece of string and I tied it on. It was actually thread, and I tied it on, and then I knotted it and glued it and cut off the ends. And now the next job is to age the fabric. So I used the same burnt sienna that I used before. And here I am just covering that bandana and making it aged so that it looks like it's been there for several centuries. I found that taking the watered down paint and rubbing it in with my fingers really, really helped it get into the fabric, and it made it look really, really old ASAP, just instantly. Okay, so now the next thing was he has this frilly, ruffly type front on of his shirt. And so I started to use this particular lace, but I realized it wasn't working, so I switched to this one. Now I had cut off the, I don't know what you call that, the piece that the lace is glued to, and I thought, well, that's perfect for a collar. So I cut off another piece and I added it for the other side of the collar. And now I'm going to be adding the ruffling part. I sort of just glued a piece on and then turned it and twisted it and glued it in on itself again. And the effect really came out good. I thought this was the perfect lace to use for this project. So now it's time to work on his jacket, but before I can do that, I'm going to add some ruffles just above his hands where his wrists are, to make it look like the shirt had ruffled sleeves. And now I'm starting to put the fabric over it. Now this fabric that I'm using for the jacket and the bandana, I actually got at Hobby Lobby for 37 cents. It was a bandana itself, which I thought was ironic. And in the reference image, you can see that the outfit he's wearing, the jacket he's wearing, and the bandana have colors to them. I really looked at it closely, and it looks almost like a floral pattern of some kind. But when I saw this, I thought this is perfect because it has pops of color. And it's just going to get aged anyway. And when I aged the bandana, I thought it was absolutely perfect. So for 37 cents, I figured I'd give it a try, and it worked out really, really well. It was slightly challenging to put on the sleeves on a bent arm, but it worked out really well, and the jacket was very, very easy to make. I just glued it right to his body with some hot glue, and then I glued it to itself with some tacky glue. Now, I wanted to leave the jacket long because he's going to be seated at the organ, and he's going to have a little bench to sit on, and I wanted the jacket to go over the edge of the bench, so I left it really, really long. And here I am using the tacky glue to glue it to itself and flattening it out, smoothing it out. And here's another seam. And getting off some of the excess glue. And the great thing about the pattern is you can just put it any which way and it looks right. So here it is, sort of the long, you can see the long edge of the jacket. And we're back to the eye patch. Now everything is dried and staying on there with the tacky glue. So I added a little dab of white because it's supposed to be a pearl in the center. And the other part of him that I needed to make You can't see the lower part of his torso in the movie at all, but I thought he's got to have pants. So I used this blue fabric and I tried to put the fabric on. First, I tried to put it on with tacky glue, but that didn't really work. So I used a combination of hot glue and tacky glue. I have made dollhouse clothing before, and you usually make it inside out and then slide the sleeve or the pant leg onto the doll. But with this crazy bent position, it was kind of impossible and gave me a lot of trouble. So this is by far the worst looking pair of pants I have ever made for a doll in my life. But the good news is nobody's gonna see it. It's just gonna be, he's just gonna be seated at the organ and it should be totally fine. I mean, you all know now, but nobody else is gonna know. And once I age it up, it's gonna be hard to tell anyway. And here he is so far, sitting on the little stool, getting ready to play the organ. Now, at this point in time, I needed to level out the back of the jacket. And I liked the fact that there were some strings hanging down, made it look a little bit used, a little bit old, which it is, it's centuries old. So it's okay if there are a couple strings hanging down. So now it's time to age the jacket and the ruffled shirt. Starting with the shirt, and I just want to do a little bit because again, using my reference image, the shirt is not as dark as everything else. So I wanted to give it a little bit of a highlight. I didn't age everything. I just left some of the white, but I added a little off-white just to make it look a little bit dirty. And now I'm using the burnt sienna again, watered down, and I'm adding on Years of Grime. And here he is. Oh yeah, and my camera decided to switch to portrait. Sorry about that. I glued on a couple pieces of cording and I used Loctite for that. Now I should have done it under the bandana, but since I didn't, I am just going to be gluing the cording on top of the bandana and gluing it to his head. And then I'll just put a clothespin there to clamp it and make sure that it doesn't go anywhere and let it dry. Now the last piece of detail, which I thought was really interesting and a little strange, was this chain that he's wearing around his neck. So I found a piece of chain in my stash and I used some watered down black paint and I aged that up as well. And now it's time to give some shading and some shadowing with some watered down black paint. So anywhere where there's a crease, I'm adding some details of the watered down black paint to really give it some depth. In order to make sure that the cording doesn't pop off, I used a trick from Bentley House Miniatures where I took a strip of paper. Actually, I used a part of an envelope that was in the recycle bin and I just glued it on there and I painted it black. And yes, my camera is back to portrait. And here he is, 100% done. He's got his chain on and he's good to go. And here's the reference image again, just so you can see the difference. And here are some fun photos I took of him at the organ. This is a dollar store skeleton sitting next to the finished product of One Eyed Willy. And they make me laugh because they look like they're, waiting to be interviewed on a talk show or something. And they both look like they're really having a great time. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. And also, give me a comment below and let me know what your favorite Halloween movie is. I hope you have a great Halloween and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!